I realized that I did a video on how Glory Days came about, what sort of inspiration caused me to start writing it, working on it, and I never did that for Tall Tales. So let's go ahead and do that. The story will actually sound vaguely familiar if you've read Tall Tales, but I'll explain what's going on with that afterwards. In 2004, I took a trip to Chicago to visit my friend Brandon, who I knew through a online tabletop group that we played on IRC, which sounds like a very old-fashioned sentence now that Discord's kind of taken over that niche. But that was what we did at the time. So I took a trip over to Chicago to visit him for a week, starting at near the end of October into the very beginning of November. At the time, he was living in an apartment with like 7 other people, 8 other people, something like that. It was a 2-story apartment with a living room and kitchen and a bathroom and one of the bedrooms upstairs, and then a stairway down to like the other bedrooms and a secondary living room. And so most of the people lived downstairs. However, there was a girl there named Barbie who was crashing on one of the couches, and I, for the week that I was there, was sleeping on the other couch. Now, just about everybody in that house was some form of pagan, and there was a druid there, and Barbie was no exception. She was involved in Wicca, I believe it was. And so we were hanging out, and me and Barbie ended up getting along really well. And over the course of this week, a few different supernatural things happened. One of which involves her trying to reach out and contact a ghost that was haunting the upstairs bathroom, and me having a direct encounter with that ghost. Now, nothing much came of that. We talked about it. We tried to work out some way to maybe do something about it. It didn't end up happening. A couple weeks later, I had a dream that based on that event. So in this dream, we actually did go ahead and try to carry out an exorcism, and we went through this whole thing. And it was an interesting little story, but it wasn't me in the story, and it wasn't Barbie in the dream. It was these fictionalized characters that had some influence from us. And so out of curiosity, I started poking at this idea. I thought, hey, when I woke up and I started writing stuff down, I thought, hey, I'm going to go ahead and explore his character because they seem kind of interesting. A little while later, as this went on, I ended up writing out this whole story, and I decided I wanted to make a webcomic. It was called Madison P.I. And so I was poking at the idea, I was writing stuff out, I was coming up with character descriptions, I was coming up with the general plot line, and really what that story would have been what is now almost entirely contained in Tall Tales Volume 5. Like, it was not any of the stuff that's happening right now. So I started working with my friend Alex. He's an artist, and he started drawing up pages based on the scripts that I was writing. And the scripts aren't very good. They're clearly a first draft. They were something that definitely needed a lot of work. But he started drawing up pages based on those. For instance, here's a couple of them that I still have scanned into my computer. So we kept working on that. We kind of came up with some ideas. We played with it. We worked out the plot. We came up with more details. We fleshed out some of the characters. We didn't end up ever posting it. It didn't get far enough for us to start posting it. We wanted to have a fair bit of the text done before we start posting it, and we never got to that point. Ultimately, he moved away from the area. I moved away from the area. We didn't talk for a number of years, and so I just kind of took all of my notes, all the stuff that I had originally come up with, and all of the characters that I developed, and tried to pick out anything that would be like identifiably his, something that really I didn't have claim to. I tried to pick anything like that out and then take whatever I had left and kept playing with it, kept exploring it. And as I started fleshing it out and as I started kind of detailing it more, I realized this is going to be a much larger story than I had originally planned. But I was nervous about actually making it. I was concerned about putting this stuff out on the internet and having it be available and having people start interacting with it. I wasn't sure that I was really ready to do that. In 2015, though, I was convinced, thanks to a pair of documentaries, to start just making something and putting it out there. I debated at the time whether I was going to do Madison P.I. or if I wanted to start exploring a different story that I was working on called Fatebound. And what I ultimately decided was that Madison P.I., which was becoming much larger than just about Madison, was something that I really wasn't ready to do yet. And so I set it aside to continue kind of planning and thinking it through, and I started making the webcomic Fatebound, which I did for a couple years, but then I couldn't keep up with, and I ended up putting it on hiatus, and it's still there. You can check it out. Actually, if you like, you can go to this website and read what's there now. And so all of this kind of started to come together around 2018. And by December 2018, I started writing the book and publishing sections, bits of story, on the website. But the big thing is that ultimately this is where Tall Tales comes from, is this supernatural encounter and a number of others. In fact, there's a lot of things throughout the books of Tall Tales that are personal experiences with the supernatural that I am putting into this fictional narrative. And there's a few different reasons that I did that, but the big idea here is that there is one narrative, there is one big story that all of these things fit into that is fictional. The whole encounter between Madison and Hecate, all of this stuff with Father Benedict Monti and the cult and all this other stuff, all of these things, this big picture ideas, are all fiction. But the stories themselves, the short stories that happen within that narrative, some of them are true, and there's a veneer of fiction over them, and some of them are more fictionalized than others. Born of Water, the first story in the book, and the story that basically introduces Madison and Jackie, you'll notice, does have a lot of similarities to what actually happened. Most of the major beats of that story really did happen. The climax didn't. That's part of the fictionalizing it to fit into the larger narrative. But a lot of the other beats really did. And this is going to continue throughout Tall Tales. It's going to taper off, though. So there is probably about half of all of the stories that I know I'm going to use in some form in Tall Tales were already in Volume 1. Like a smaller percentage is going to be in Volume 2, or is already in Volume 2, a few are in Volume 3. And by the time we get to Volume 5, as the plan currently stands, it'll be entirely fiction. There won't be any real stories in Volume 5. But that might change. I don't know yet. I'm still kind of fleshing out some of the details that far in advance. But yeah, that's where Tall Tales comes from. It's a blend of real-life events that have inspired this story, and a blend of that and fiction. So yeah, that's the origin and source of Tall Tales. I hope you enjoy it. You can read more and check out the whole story here at talltalesuf.com. Thank you and enjoy.